Back in 1949, it was a pretty large community.
It was a booming town. They were processing fish.
It had a school and a post office.
Probably would have been a city, if it would have kept thriving.
In the remote wilderness of Portlock, hunters ventured into the unknown, only to return with eerie tales of an unseen predator lurking in the shadows.
Portlock was cursed and Bigfoot's place and nobody goes there.
Mysterious growls, glimpses of towering figures, and vanishing prey left these seasoned hunters terrified. What was this creature? Was it a beast of legend, or something far more sinister stalking the land? The haunted history of Portlock. Across the vast expanse of America's ghost towns, few hold a story as chilling and enigmatic as Portlock, Alaska. Nestled on the southern edge of the Kenai Peninsula along Port Chatham Bay, this remote settlement wasn't just abandoned, it was seemingly forsaken, leaving behind whispers of terror and mystery. Portlock's history spans centuries, with settlers attempting to tame its rugged wilderness on 4 separate occasions. Yet each effort ended in sudden, unexplained desertion. Officially, Portlock's demise came in the 1950s, when residents relocated to towns along the newly constructed Alaska Route 1. Practicality dictated their move, or so the story goes. Beneath the veneer of practicality, a darker tale lingers. Urban legends tell of Nantinak, a terrifying Sasquatch-like creature that haunted the area. Described as a huge, hairy, half-man, half-beast figure, Nantinak was said to stalk the forested trails and mist-shrouded coastline, preying on the town's residents. Locals spoke in hushed tones of its eerie presence, linking it to dozens of mysterious deaths and disappearances in the early 20th century. Fear became a constant companion for those who dared call Portlock home. The legend of Nantinak stems from the native Alaskan Dena'ina people. Its name, derived from the word Nantina, translates to those who steal people. According to folklore, this creature was no mere myth. It was a real and malevolent force. Stories tell of hunters and lumberjacks who vanished without a trace, their fates attributed to the creature's deadly grasp. For years, the specter of Nantinak loomed over Portlock, a shadowy figure blending the supernatural with terrifying plausibility. The earliest explorers and settlers might have dismissed these tales as superstition, but as time wore on, reports of strange sightings and inexplicable violence grew harder to ignore. Accounts of massive footprints, guttural howls in the dead of night, and inexplicable claw marks on trees created an atmosphere of mounting dread. For some, the beast wasn't just an urban legend, it was an apex predator they couldn't outwit or escape. So what truly happened in Portlock? Dark mystery of Portlock's demise. Portlock's story begins in 1786, when Captain Nathaniel Portlock of the British Royal Navy sailed through a seemingly peaceful area, marveling at its beauty. Impressed, he gave the land his name. But what began as a tribute soon turned into something far darker, marking the start of a terrifying chapter in the area's history. The haunting began not long after Portlock's arrival. It was 1785 when the first signs of trouble surfaced. The land, once rich with potential, quickly became a place of fear. The unsettling reports began to spread. People spoke of eerie creatures stalking the land, killing animals, and terrorizing the few who dared to remain. And that was just the beginning. This region, once filled with promise, had become cursed, a dangerous place no one would want to stay. As the years passed, Portlock and his crew arrived to settle the land. But their optimism quickly turned into dread when they made an eerie discovery: an abandoned native village. The remnants were clear. A community had once thrived here, but they were now gone. No signs of struggle, no clear explanation for their departure. Just empty huts, abandoned streets, and a haunting silence. Why would people leave such a bountiful land? This mystery left the crew puzzled, but Portlock pressed on, determined to establish a settlement. However, the eerie mystery of the land wasn't finished yet. Soon, members of Portlock's crew began to fall ill. But it wasn't just sickness that plagued them. It was something far more unsettling, a deep, paralyzing fear that consumed them. Even the strongest men, the bravest sailors, couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of terror that seemed to grip them without warning. As their condition worsened, it became clear something was wrong. The land wasn't just cursed, it was alive with a malevolent force, one that preyed on the minds and spirits of those who dared to settle here. The crew, now in a state of panic, begged Portlock to leave. Reluctantly, Portlock agreed. He knew something had to be done, but the fear of what lurked in the shadows was too great to ignore. With that, the crew abandoned the land that would forever bear Portlock's name, leaving behind the unanswered questions, the terrifying memories, and a land that would remain untamed and shrouded in mystery. Hunters and the unknown predator. Portlock, a remote and eerie settlement, has long been a place of mystery. 6 years before its fateful history began, a group of Spanish explorers arrived, eager to claim the land. They were struck by the same strange sight, a bountiful area that seemed oddly deserted. Despite its apparent promise, the explorers soon found themselves gripped by a terrifying sickness and an overwhelming fear they couldn't explain. Eerie cries from the dense forests seemed to draw closer with every passing night, growing louder and more unnerving. One by one, the crew members succumbed to the sickness, their courage eroding until they abandoned the land, fleeing into the unknown, their minds consumed by fear. This wasn't an isolated event. The men of Portlock's later expeditions experienced the same unsettling atmosphere. Despite enduring harsh conditions and brutal climates in other regions, something about Portlock drove these seasoned explorers to flee. What was it about this land that could make even the bravest men retreat? Was it a strange sickness or something far more sinister? The mystery deepens. Theories began to emerge, some more chilling than others. One of the more unsettling explanations was infrasound, low-frequency sound waves that certain animals emit. This phenomenon can cause nausea, dizziness, and a powerful sense of unease, which could explain the crew's irrational fear. But that was far from the only strange event. In the area, rumors of an unknown creature spread. The locals spoke of a massive hairy beast similar to a yeti or Bigfoot known as the Nantinak. This creature was said to haunt the land, and sightings were frequent. But even more disturbing were the tales of a woman in black, her dress dragging behind her as she appeared on the cliffs above the town. With a face as white as death, she would scream and moan, only to vanish into the rocks. One of the most shocking stories was that of Albert Petka, who encountered the Nantinak in the 1920s. Armed with only his dogs, Petka attempted to confront the creature but was struck with a fatal blow to the chest. He survived long enough to share his terrifying experience, but died from his injuries shortly afterward. But this wasn't the end of the strange occurrences. Hunters and prospectors were reported missing regularly. Their bodies discovered in a creek, their limbs torn apart as though by an unearthly force. Even a schoolteacher who grew up in Portlock in the 1970s recounted stories of the community's deep fear of the dark, unknown forces lurking in the night. People vanished, and the town seemed to be shrouded in an eerie, ever-present fear. Some skeptics, like Weed, suggested that the creature sightings might have been misunderstandings. Perhaps an unusually large bear misidentified from a distance. But even Weed couldn't dismiss the unnerving reality that locals swore by the stories. For them, the Nantinak had existed for centuries, a terrifying part of their history that no one could easily explain. Vanishing into the wilderness. Portlock, Alaska, holds a chilling secret, one that has remained dormant for decades, waiting for the right moment to resurface. For over 80 years, the abandoned town stood untouched, a relic of a forgotten past. But in 1867, a group of Sauk natives seeking new opportunities arrived, eager to settle in the fertile land. The dense forests, teeming with wildlife, promised a prosperous life filled with fish, clams, and moose. They believed they had found paradise, but what they didn't know was that this land held horrors beyond their imagination. Just 1 month after their arrival, the Sauk faced something far worse than the usual tribal skirmishes. The land, it seemed, was already inhabited by something far darker. Night after night, their peaceful village was raided, not by rival tribes, but by terrifying, monstrous giants. These weren't the kind of attackers anyone could fight off. These were cannibal giants, huge primal beings that ravaged their village with an insatiable hunger for human flesh. The Suak fought back desperately, but the giants were relentless. Each attack grew more savage, leaving the villagers powerless against their brutal assaults. The Suak would soon abandon the land, fleeing into the wilderness to escape the terror that had overtaken them. But this was only the beginning. Fast forward to the 1930s, and the mysteries of Portlock would take an even darker turn. Andrew Cammock, a logger working alone in the woods, was the first victim of a series of brutal murders that would haunt the town's history. On a seemingly ordinary day, something strange happened. Cammock was struck on the head with a massive piece of logging equipment, so large that it seemed impossible for a single person to lift. The question arose, who or what could have killed him? This marked the birth of the Portlock mystery. Soon after, a group of hunters tracking a moose stumbled upon something even more unsettling. Huge footprints, far larger than any known animal, were found near the site. Dismissing the tracks as the work of a large creature, the hunters continued their search. But the further they ventured, the more eerie the scene became. Broken tree branches and blood-streaked tracks led them to the conclusion that something much more terrifying had taken place. There was no moose to be found, no explanation for the bloodshed, and no sign of what had caused the devastation. As the years passed, the executions continued, and the strange events multiplied. The giants return. When the forest was full of life, the terrifying giants would disappear, leaving Portlock with a false sense of peace. But once the animals became scarce, the giants returned, each time more monstrous and bloodthirsty than before. What if the darkness in the forest wasn't just a myth? What if the legends were real? By 1905, the giants' relentless attacks forced the Suak people to flee their homes. Stories spread like wildfire, recounting terrifying night raids and human hunts. Portlock, once a thriving village, was abandoned, and a thick shadow of fear descended on the land. No one dared to settle in the cursed place for years. But in 1921, a new group of settlers, Russian Alu, arrived with hope and determination. Could they conquer the land that had driven so many away? The Alu brought the promise of progress, turning Portlock into a bustling town. A cannery for the abundant salmon, a post office, and a school were established, as they attempted to build a thriving community in the cursed land. But was it truly safe, or was something lurking, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? The Alu knew the terrifying legends, the half-man, half-beast known as the Nonok. This wasn't just folklore, it was a real danger. Their ancestors had fled Portlock, carrying with them haunting stories of nightmarish creatures roaming the misty forests. To protect themselves, the Alu enforced strict rules. A nightly curfew was established, armed guards were stationed at every corner, and the villagers avoided the fog. For almost a decade, their precautions seemed to work, and the village thrived. The ominous presence of the Nonok was kept at bay. But one night, everything changed. A deadly mistake shattered their fragile peace. What was once a safe haven was now on the brink of disaster. The fog rolled in again, but this time it wasn't just the mist. They were coming. The giants were back. Could the Alu survive the terror that had driven others away? The haunting mystery of Portlock, a town gripped by fear. Portlock was once a quiet, peaceful town, nestled on the edge of a vast wilderness. In the early days, the community maintained strict rules, but as the years passed and the town grew, so did the sense of safety among its residents. By 1930, these rules began to loosen, and the once vigilant residents grew complacent. Little did they know, this would be their undoing. In 1931, a logger named Andrew Locke made a fatal decision. He ventured deep into the forest, breaking an unspoken rule to stay near the town's edge. His friends, unaware of the danger, remained behind, hoping he would return soon. But when he didn't, they set out to search for him, hoping for the best. What they found, however, was far worse than they could have imagined. Clock's body was discovered in a brutal, mangled state. His head had been crushed under his sled, an object so heavy that no human could have lifted it alone. His loyal sled dogs, which had been pulling the sled, were torn apart, their remains scattered across the ground. Even more shocking, the sled had been thrown far from the scene, as if something far stronger than human hands had been involved. The men who found Clock's body were speechless, unable to comprehend the violent display before them. What kind of creature could have done this? The scene left a chilling message. Something monstrous and terrifying was lurking in the forest, watching them from the shadows. The town's sense of safety was shattered that day, replaced by fear and uncertainty. In the weeks that followed, the residents of Portlock could feel a dark presence closing in. Soon, another horrifying encounter would cement the town's terrifying fate. Tom Larson, a local resident, ventured out to chop wood for his fish traps along the shore. As he worked, a movement caught his eye. He turned to see a massive, hairy creature standing upright on the beach. The creature was too large, too animalistic to be human, yet it stared at Larson with an unsettling intelligence. The hair on the back of his neck stood up as he froze in terror. He couldn't look away as the creature's gaze locked with his. It was as if the creature was studying him, trying to figure out who or what he was. Larson's heart raced as he realized the truth. The creature was not just a figment of his imagination, but something real and deadly. Was this the same beast responsible for Clock's horrific death? Was Portlock being stalked by a creature of unimaginable power? And if so, what chance did they have against something so terrifying and unnatural? The residents of Portlock were now trapped in their own town, caught between the safety of their homes and the horrifying unknown lurking in the wilderness. The terror that had gripped the town only intensified as the days went on. What was this creature, and why had it targeted them? Could anyone survive the nightmare that had descended upon Portlock? The mystery surrounding Portlock remains unsolved, and the town's tragic fate serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can hide in the most unexpected places. A town's fight for survival. Until the unsettling deaths of Clock and Larson stirred whispers of something far more terrifying than any animal lurking in the forests. Fear began to settle over the community, and people speculated that the creature responsible was no ordinary predator. It was a vengeful spirit, much like a tiger seeking revenge on a poacher or an elephant retaliating against those who threaten its herd. The creature, known as the Noto, seemed to hold a grudge and was willing to bide its time, waiting to strike. At first, the disappearances seemed like nothing more than a coincidence. A few gold prospectors went missing, but their absence was easily explained away as extended trips. Then, a group of hunters vanished without a trace. Still, the townspeople brushed it off as a long expedition. But as more people began to disappear, the unsettling pattern became impossible to ignore. Each disappearance seemed to draw the unseen predator closer to the heart of Portlock. As the disappearances continued, the terrifying truth became undeniable. The town's initial suspicions of wild animal attacks were dismissed, but when bodies began to wash ashore and others were discovered in the woods, mauled beyond recognition with deep claw marks and bite wounds, fear gripped the town. Something was hunting them, and it wasn't just an ordinary creature. Some of the bodies had been torn apart with an insatiable hunger, and the townspeople could no longer deny that they were being stalked by a terrifying, unknown predator. Despite growing terror, the local defense force, the UTI, stepped up their efforts to protect the community. They enforced curfews and increased patrols, but no matter what precautions they took, the creature continued its hunt, drawing closer with each passing day. The fear of the Noto took hold, and more people began to accept that the creature was real. However, some skeptics still clung to the idea that the attacks were the work of an unusually clever bear, with the behavior of the predator resembling that of black bears that roamed the area. But then came a discovery that changed everything. A body was found, washed down from the mountains after spring rains. The remains were mutilated in a way no bear could ever achieve. The dismemberment was far too precise, too brutal, and it sent a clear message. This was no bear. Something much darker, much more dangerous, was stalking Portlock. With the growing body count, the residents of Portlock were pushed to the brink. The UTI increased their presence, but nothing seemed to stop the creature's relentless hunt. It was smarter, faster, and stronger than anything they had ever encountered. As the fear grew and the deaths mounted, the people of Portlock realized one terrifying truth. They were being hunted by a force beyond their comprehension, something far more terrifying than they had ever imagined. The Mysterious Abandonment. Official reports claimed that around 15 people had gone missing, but the townspeople knew the truth was far worse. The bodies discovered were mutilated in ways no bear or wolf could ever achieve. Something far more sinister was at work. As the death toll rose, fear spread like wildfire. It became clear that survival in Portlock was growing increasingly impossible. The townspeople lived in constant dread, wondering if they would be the next to vanish. In a desperate bid to escape the nightmare, the villagers made a bold decision. With no warning, they fled their homes overnight, abandoning everything they knew. It wasn't a conventional evacuation, it was a calculated move to outwit a relentless, intelligent predator that had already driven them to the brink. The town was evacuated in a matter of hours, leaving behind only one man, the post office worker. He remained behind, determined to fulfill his duties, though he knew the town was being consumed by fear. During those last haunting nights, the lone man barricaded himself inside the post office. He reported hearing the unmistakable sound of heavy, two-legged footsteps echoing through the deserted streets. The night was thick with the sense of something or someone lurking just outside. The terror that had gripped the town seemed to intensify in those final hours. And after a while, even the post office worker couldn't stay. He locked up for good, leaving Portlock abandoned and silent. But the creature that had terrorized the town didn't vanish with the last of the villagers. By 1951, one might have thought the nightmare was over, that the predator had retreated back into the wilderness. However, the creature's appetite for human flesh had grown insatiable. Nearly 2 decades later, in 1969, a hunter ventured into the forest near the ghost town, hoping to track wild goats. But he quickly realized he was not alone. At first, it was subtle, the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps and the rustling of underbrush. But then, the footsteps grew faster, louder. He wasn't being followed, he was being hunted. Terrified, the hunter bolted, heart racing, knowing that he was now part of a terrifying legacy that stretched back centuries. The haunting legacy of the Nonok. In the heart of Alaska, a chilling legend endures, one that has plagued the remote town of Portlock for decades. It all begins with massive, human-like footprints leading up a mountain, evidence of a creature far beyond ordinary predators. This beast, something that could overpower even a fully grown moose, was no mere animal. It was something otherworldly, a force of nature that no one could explain. As time passed, Portlock faded into legend, its stories of the terrifying creature known as the Nonok only growing stronger. The eerie encounters shared by those who dared venture too close left the town abandoned. The chilling lesson was clear: some places are best left undisturbed. One of the most unnerving tales comes from 1990, when an Anchorage paramedic was called to assist a 70-year-old man who had suffered a heart attack in the Eagle River jail. As the paramedic worked to revive him, he tried to break the silence with stories of his outdoor adventures. But the old man remained silent, lost in his thoughts. That silence, some believe, held the key to understanding the mysteries of Portlock. By the 1950s, the myth of the Nonok had spread far and wide across Alaska. Some dismissed the stories as exaggerated tales or fabrications. Yet the strange occurrences around Portlock were undeniable. Locals reported uprooted trees, driven back into the ground upside down, an unsettling sight that defied natural explanations. Skeptics might suggest that it was the work of a violent storm, but many insist it's a phenomenon linked only to the Nonok. But the most puzzling part of the Portlock story is why the entire community fled overnight in 1950. If the creature was just a bear, why didn't the residents hunt it down? Alaska's laws permit residents to eliminate animals that pose a threat. But instead of taking action, the entire town vanished. Was the Nonok an intelligent predator, capable of retaliation if the townspeople prepared for a fight? Some believe Bigfoot, much like the Nonok, avoids humans during hunting season. It's theorized that the creature stays out of the woods when people with weapons are nearby. But some residents of Portlock, like Sally Ash, offer a different explanation. She suggests that the town was abandoned for better economic opportunities, pointing to schools and churches in other towns. But this theory is complicated by the testimony of Ash's cousin, Melania Kell, who spoke about Nonok's deadly presence. According to Kell, the town's departure was because the creature was killing them. Ash later refuted Kell's account, insisting there were no killings, but acknowledged sightings of the Nonok. Yet Ash's retelling raises even more questions. If the creature was harmless, why did the Alutiiq have strict rules about staying inside during foggy weather? And why did Ash herself caution travelers to remain quiet and avoid attracting attention while passing through the area? The careful precautions and eerie tales point to something far darker than just economic reasons. Some believe the Nonok could be a distant relative of the legendary giants said to live in the Solomon Islands, with descriptions matching its massive size and supernatural strength. If this is true, it raises an unsettling question. What else could be lurking in the remote corners of the world? The mystery of Portlock endures a place where shadows reign and the unknown remains. For those brave enough to venture there, the stories of Portlock serve as a grim reminder. Some mysteries are best left undisturbed. We hope you enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for more.